Hello and welcome. If you like to think for yourself, have open and honest conversations, and you like to brave freely, you've come to the right place. My name is Merritt Jacks,
I'm Karis Raya.
and we're not your donkey. So, we're here to talk about what the hell just happened in Canada in terms of our elections just now. Because if you recall our very first podcast, we spoke about Canada and Pierre Poilievre having a 20-point lead and Trump
Wasn't
trolling
it
Trudeau.
26? It wasn't a 26-point lead?
Maybe at one point it was 26. Like, it was wild, and like we were all
Wild.
cheering him on. And then Trudeau resigned, and wow, all hell broke loose in this country, I can tell you. But anyway, so my take on it, and I was saying this before as I was watching what was happening. I said to my liberal friends, you understand you're still being trolled. Trump plays chess and you're all playing checkers, and
Mm,
Trump wants Carney to get in, because then Alberta and Saskatchewan will leave. They're not sticking around for one more round of it. Well, it'll probably be a couple of elections, but they're in the process of formally starting the separation process. And what happens if that goes on? People go, well, Alberta and Saskatchewan are landlocked. I thought, oh, not if they join America. And I would say one point is that Trump never wanted Canada. We're full of liberals and lefties and NDPers
that's
and
true.
communists. Nobody in the States with the sane mind wants Canada, all of Canada. But why not get the richest part of it? So, anyway, that's my take on it. And I think Trump
Mm,
won. That's who I think won this election.
Okay, well, I mean, there's no doubt that Trump doesn't actually want Canada to be the 51st state, if only
I
because
know,
of
under
what you
no
said, that it would tip the
circumstances.
scales. It would be another California,
Yeah,
and essentially we would have Democrats in the White House for who
forever.
knows? I mean, it would just, I mean, if, in terms of the electoral process, it would be an absolutely a disaster. But I disagree that Trump wanted Carney to win. I mean, ultimately, you could be right. We don't know what's in his heart
No,
or
we
what's
don't.
going on up there. But like, I don't think that I don't think Trump's strategy is that forward seeking or deep. I think that Trump would have been happy to have somebody to deal with, like you know, Poilievre.
Yeah.
And I I mean, okay, there's a few things here. If we want to look at the context for this, everybody, oh sorry, one second.
Oh,
Uh
yeah, I better turn my phone off. Sorry.
um so everybody is screaming that Carney getting elected essentially is Trump's fault. And in a sense, in one sense, in a very superficial sense, it is. But ultimately, I think we have to look at the context of where these comments about the 51st state came from.
Hmm.
And if we understand the context, then we understand that if we actually really want to get to the source of this is Trudeau through and through. These comments about the 51st state did not come out of nowhere. What
Hmm.
happened was Trump was negotiating with Trudeau, or he was talking about tariffs, right? Leveling tariffs. He said, look, you're not closing your border. You're flooding us with fentanyl. You're flooding us with CCP agents. You are ripping us off in terms of trade deals, right?
100% agree.
You send us your
100%.
banks. We're
Yep.
not allowed to have our banks in Canada, right? And what was Trudeau's response? Trudeau's response was, if you impose those tariffs, then we will collapse. Our economy will collapse. Now, Trump's response was 100% correct to that. He said, exactly. This is my
I
point.
know.
We shouldn't have to be sustaining your economy. Like, you
Yeah.
are a sovereign nation. And if we are sustaining your economy, then maybe you're not. And you might as well become the 51st state, because then we can actually have
Yeah.
an
Well,
economic
let's
playing.
also not forget that Trudeau knows nothing about the economy. I don't even know if he knows how to spell it. Okay. So let's be clear that if he would say something like that, he has no grounding in some of
Exactly.
this.
So the
But
point is that Trump's response is yes, it's bluster and yes, it's trolling and yes, it's taunting, but it's perfectly legitimate legitimate in the context that it was made. And me and you talked about this on another
Mm.
on a different episode. Like it's a completely legitimate thing to say, and kind of a way to shock Canadians into reality.
Well,
The
if I would just step back for a second, when I was trying to have discussions with my friends who have serious TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, I would say they would go on no, first of all, he doesn't want us. Okay, guaranteed he doesn't want you people for sure. Secondly, let's step back and did you not notice that directly after Trump rightly saying deal with the frickin' borders and stop sending fentanyl down here, we suddenly had four massive Chinese run fentanyl labs shut down. Maybe it was three, I don't know, but there were a lot of
Wow.
massive ones. And I said, wait a minute, was it Trump that noticed that? Or how come
You mean in China? Fentanyl labs shut down in China.
no, in Canada,
Wait, what
run
do
by
you
the
mean?
Chinese?
Wait, what?
Yes. Okay.
What?
So
Oh my gosh.
yeah, exactly. So let's just stop and think about it. Fentanyl labs are running along, going fine,
It's so
whatever in
brazen there in
Canada,
Canada. It's like
funded
unreal,
by the Chinese.
right?
And here we had our motorcycle gangs then shipped by Sikh truck drivers very often down to the States. And some of my friends would go, well, only 3% of the things of fentanyl was captured at the border. I said, yeah. And then 80% was caught in towns and cities across America. This is wicked and deadly. And it's funded by China, operated by Chinese folks in different parts of Canada, and then sent down to the States. It's absolutely communist evil that's happening. So,
Yeah, yeah.
why the heck, if we had any leadership, did we not stop that before
Of
Trump
course.
mentioned it?
Of
Right?
course. Closing the border would have been the first step, absolutely. And that's not hard to do. We saw Trump do it with the southern border
Yeah.
in a matter of one executive order.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. So then the second thing is managing the border. Okay, across Canada. We'd all love that. Well, not all of us, the lefties don't, but we'd love to have the border managed because when Trump gets mean with something, your quote unquote refugees, which we all know are illegal immigrants, wander across into Canada and get our tax dollars. I mean, we had people just walk across the border, and Trump won presidency with suitcases that our RCMP would then help carry into Canada. Because Trudeau said, we welcome every one of you, poor refugees. So,
right.
yeah, we
And
should
we know that
manage the
Canada
border.
has a serious problem more than America does with radical Muslims
Oh, serious.
and potentially um potential terrorists, and
Yep.
those we are worried about those coming out across our border, our
We've
northern
sent
border as
you a
well.
lot of terrorists, just to let you know. Unfortunately, you've caught, I hope, most of them. So, because of this weird historical relationship where most Canadians, well, almost no Canadians were terrorists, we could go back and forth across the border with
Mm,
our driver's license for a century. Well, before this drivers came, but for like 80 years, we could just show some ID and go across the border back and forth. It was a very open
right.
border, very generous people, etc.
Right.
And then we
Enter the
started
age of globalism.
globalism or importing terrorists.
Mhm.
America said you got to stop it because why try to get in through New York if you could just pop in Canada, drive across into the United States? Bingo. So Trump wasn't wrong with any of that. And my liberal friends, just to let you know, knew none of that because they read only the CBC and other state funded news outlets. And I have to put
Sure.
news outlets in quotes. So they never knew what was going on. I would have to hang, pictures up in front of them and saying that's what's going on. And then finally, after all this, tariff stuff that Trudeau was doing, Fox News put an incredible image out that had, how the world has responded to Trump's tariffs. And do you know the only two countries right smack in the middle were the ones was China and Canada,
Canada. Yeah.
who together were going to punish America with
I know.
tariffs back.
I know. 130 countries came right to the table.
Oh, no, but not our boys. No, 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 because Trudeau doesn't know how to spell economy. He does know how to spell China. And by the way, our country
Wait,
calls itself
can you just
China.
but can you explain to me more about these fentanyl labs? Like when you say they shut down fentanyl labs, I mean obviously these things aren't advertised as fentanyl labs, right? Like what are these actual what is this infrastructure in Canada?
Well, it's a drug lab, right? So, huge drug lab. I think one of them, and I don't know if it was, I have to get the more information and we can talk about it in another show. But we had one of our labs created enough fentanyl to kill everybody in North America. I mean, just stop and think about that.
But was this a lab that was part of the medical system
No, no,
in
no, no. Sorry.
Canada?
These are, we call
Okay.
them fentanyl labs. That's where they
So
create
they're
them.
okay, so it's completely illegal, yet
Yeah.
they're
It's
operating
totally
openly.
illegal. Yeah.
Yet they're
So,
operating openly, essentially.
well, not openly, not open, like I didn't know about it. But if
Okay.
we could find them within 2 weeks of America saying shut those down, someone knew about it in our legal structure. And don't forget that our Canadian bank, TD Bank, okay, which we have in the States as well,
Mhm.
actually got fined by I think the SEC $3 billion for laundering Chinese drug money. So come
Yeah.
on, we
And
have a very
also,
sick society.
yeah, there was also issues with TD Bank with money laundering for like Hezbollah and terrorists and other stuff. I don't know what happened with that, but I know that there was like concerns there as well.
Yeah. And in my thing, I wonder how much money they really made. Like maybe, I don't know, but maybe TD made $10 billion, and then the price of operating illegally was $3 billion to the SEC, right? So there's a lot of corruption and wickedness, and everyone looks outside and says, "Oh, Canada, you cute little innocent country." No, there's a lot of illegal crime, well, crime happening here, and illegal drug money, and on and on. So
Yeah.
Trump was absolutely right to point the finger at Canada and say, smarten up. But what
Yeah.
happened was the more he kept going after 51st state,
I
the
know. He
more
kept repeating it. He kept
hysterical,
repeating it.
Canadians got. And the very people who hated the Canadian flag during the Freedom Convoy, when those people were genuinely trying to engage in our society and our democracy, the very people on the left who said, "Oh, the Canadian flag is shameful for me," just like in the States, some young Americans were saying, "Oh, we can't, have the American flag. It provokes me. It's colonialism, it's racism, etc." These very people wrapped themselves in the flag and wanted all of us to come in together as Team Canada. And I said, "No, I am Team Canada. You guys are crazy." So,
That's really interesting. The
yeah,
like the juxtaposition of like suddenly these people found their national pride when it's like, you know, I mean, where has it been? I mean, where has it been all these years? Canada
yeah.
for the first time had a national debt under Trudeau,
And
Life
I
was
was at the
completely
grocery.
unaffordable.
Yeah, exactly. I was at the grocery store just picking up some food, and the grocery store clerk around my age said, "Well, did you see that in Zehrs strawberries are going for $1.99?" And I said, "No, really?" And I was in a different store. Okay, so I thought, why is she talking to me about another store? She's, "Yeah, they're made in America, so people aren't buying them." And I said, "I buy them. I'd buy them. So thanks for letting me know." And then I made it really clear. I said, "I've always been buying Canada, made in Canada. I look for made in Canada, made
Yeah.
in America, made in Europe, in Western
Mm.
civilized nations." And but unfortunately, these cushy elites think that anything made in China, if they can make a buck off it, it's fine. And
Right.
now all of a sudden they care. So I'm not interested in them. They're not Team
It's
Canada.
true. And these are the people that suddenly cared are the people that tipped the scale, right? Like
Oh
if you
yeah,
look at, right, if you look at what happened, right,
yeah,
with this 20 point lead that Poilievre had, that was, unheard of, right?
yeah,
Um, and then all of a sudden, this guy Carney wins the election. It's the people that changed, that were might have been liberal, probably more like independent. Apparently, there's like a lot more independent voters in Canada than America.
yes,
There's
yeah.
more
We
fluidity,
swing
right?
around a bit. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so probably a lot of these people were not super partisan, but they
Mm,
recognize that 1 in 29 families go to a food bank once a month in
yeah,
Canada, and there's a shortage of 3 million homes and
yeah.
rank
Well,
anti-Semitism
oh
and
wait.
Canadian
Before that, we
farmers.
we talk about those 3 million terrible anti-Semitism. We should talk about that in the next one. What Carney's going to do or not do. But
Yeah.
what I would say is we have a sickening level of migration. Trudeau introduced 15% increase in our population, not of 15% of doctors,
Yeah.
15% more hospitals, 15% more infrastructure. Now we're all jammed on the roads. The people who come here no
Right.
longer have to take a driver's license. And there's a driver's
Right.
test. They just get given a driver's license. We have a lot of people who don't know how to drive in the snow, smashing into those of us who do. That's where the source of our housing problem is.
Right.
That's where, we have a lot of issues, and we're
I,
going to gently
yeah.
touch around the edges.
When I try to explain Canada, I'm like, imagine if California was like 75% of the country, and that's like Canada
Yeah,
because the provinces don't have as many rights as like the states and everything.
yeah, yeah.
But
So
yeah,
there's
no, I mean, I think people understood this stuff generally. And so people were probably prepared to vote in their national interest. But who were the people that ended up turning? It was like you said, it was the elites. It was the
yeah,
college educated urban dwellers, the
yeah,
media, the journalist class, right? The well-heeled
and
class
the
that can
government's
afford,
employees.
and the government's employees, good point, right? They
Mhm.
tipped the balance because they are so superficial
Yeah,
and fickle that they will react to Trump's like nationalistic
yeah.
taunts.
Now, the very
Uh,
day after the election, the province, state of Freudian slip here, the province of Alberta started the process for separation.
I heard that was only one group, not like any sort of official process, that it
Oh
was like
no, no,
one
the
group in
the no the
Alberta.
group, the way it has to work. So Smith helped it along. The
She
premier of
did.
she
Oh wow.
did. Oh yeah, she
Wow.
helped it along. So but it is a group. You have to do it as a group. You have to have a referendum, and then you have to go through a process. And the Supreme Court of Canada, in response to another province, Quebec, had provided a very clear list of how to get out of Canada. So that's what Alberta is following. Boom, 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 boom. That's where they're going. And so when all these people are going,
Do you
Team
really think that
Canada,
will happen? I mean,
uh,
that's
I
so
I think it will
huge.
actually. And I'll tell you when I first thought it would. When I saw how Trudeau treated the truckers and how these people were good, honest citizens, had their money taken away, got beaten and put under like horseback and like really beaten down by with bats and everything, with riot gear against these people who had their families there and so on. I watched that and I thought, oh, these cushy class people like Trudeau, they don't know that you do not treat a real man that way, because
No,
he will come back and he
that's the
will.
working class.
You do not treat the working class like scum and think they're going to forget it. The
Yeah.
first chance they get, Alberta's out. And
Mm,
that's the first time I thought
right.
of that. And I've said that to a few friends. They're out, but we just don't
Right.
know in maybe the next 10 years. However,
Right. Right. Right.
all
Right.
these people who were Team Canada were actually getting rid of Carney. Getting rid of Alberta. But did you know also that Carney has a relationship with Trump? Did you know that?
What's his relationship?
Through Kushner, Brookfield
Oh.
Assets and Kushner. So Trump actually was doing Carney a really big favor. The backdrop
Mm,
story is in 2018 when Kushner was part of the Trump administration. His business bought a building in, I think, New York for 1.4 billion or 1.2 billion. And then it wasn't a good investment. So we asked the Qataris to help out. And
of
the
course.
Qataris said, nah, not really. Oh, but not to worry. Brookfield Assets came to the rescue with Qatari money and
The
didn't
blind
want,
spot of both parties.
yeah, didn't want to buy the building, but said, hey, we'll do a 99-year lease for $1.4 billion cash up front. Here you go, hun. And that bailed Kushner out beautifully. When Now, to be fair, Carney wasn't in charge of Brookfield at that time. Okay, when that happened,
Okay.
but he was, I think, around 2020. And then Kushner was being called into a congressional hearing about that because that looked a little suspect.
Uh-huh.
And Brookfield with Carney came and said, "Oh no, we didn't do that. This was all us. We all wanted it. It had nothing to do with the Qataris." Saved his sweet little ass. And so Trump helped Carney. There's no
Hmm.
question in a lot of our minds that he
That's
was
really interesting.
helping. Yeah. And,
It's really interesting.
and if Canadian, like we knew all these facts before voting day. And if Canadians' Trump derangement syndrome is so severe that they're going to vote to help destroy their own country, oh, well,
It was a mob mentality, honestly.
it
Like
was. It
the
was.
mob, and mobs are the most fickle, the most irrational. Um, and I really believe that it was a mob that essentially voted Carney, and it was that same
Well, it was
mentality.
the same mob mentality that happened around I call them the Wuhan virus lockdowns. I hate having my language controlled. It wasn't COVID, it was the Wuhan virus, and we know it.
Yeah.
So anyway, during those lockdowns, Canada was very, very extreme, and it was the more on the left who were really mean and nasty
Yeah.
against individuals for strange and stupid things. So they're mean and nasty to Canada again, but that's the way it goes. And at the end of the day, I'll have to let you know that the week before the election, a lot of the people I knew who were going to vote for Polyev got
Mhm.
really tired. Some of them were crying. They knew the election results weren't going to feel great. And I said, look, whatever happens, it's the right answer. Maybe the right answer is for Alberta and Saskatchewan to become part of the states. Let's see.
I that's interesting because I always said, uh, when Obama won, Biden, Trump, whatever, I always say that like we get what we deserve. Like this is not Trump's fault. This is like, look,
No,
the
no, it's
people,
Canada. Ultimately, it's Canada's fault. I just wish he would
right?
shut up.
Like
That's
we,
all.
if this is what we want, if we want, if we want to drive cars that are forced on us and have no like food security unless like we get dictated to about like what we can grow, and if we want our universities destroyed with like anti-Semitic mobs
I
and
know.
radical Muslims, then vote it in. Like we deserve that, you know what I mean?
But I would say 44% of Canada deserves that because the rest of us didn't vote that way. We
I
voted
know,
a
but
lot of us did. So, and I've said to people, the thing is just make sure you find a way to safety in your own life where you're going to live. I actually have two friends, one who moved to Alberta with his wife 3 years ago because he saw all of this coming. He said, I'm done. I want it
mm.
out, and Alberta will be leaving at some point. That's where I want to be.
But what about like Calgary? I mean, Calgary is such a liberal stronghold of Alberta. Like, are they really? Is
It's
the
just like any American, like just like
right?
American cities, right? They're
But American cities, they take the whole state. So, I mean, how could Alberta really join the United States when you have as big of a liberal force in that province as something like
it
Calgary?
switches around a lot back to the conservatives. So I don't know what the statistics are, but I think the blue number was like 96% or something. A lot of blue. I'm sorry, in our
And blue
country,
and
blue
blue
is
in Canada means
conservative.
conservative.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Blue is
yeah.
conservative, red is
Right.
liberal, or what we would say democratic. So we have quite a lot. I should look up those stats and take a look at
Yeah.
them because it's right. Like Calgary is a city, but there's lots of, it doesn't represent all of Alberta.
Of course not. Of course not. But
Yeah.
it's the most powerful part of Alberta.
For now, we'll
Yeah.
see. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
anyway,
Carney is an absolute disaster. I don't think people really understand that Carney is actually worse than Trudeau. Like, I don't,
now,
people
why do
like,
you say that though? Like, I have my opinions, but why do you say he's worse than Trudeau?
well, my dad calls him the Davos Brahmin.
Yes, that's why I would say the same thing.
He is, you know, he's the corporate suit. He's completely ingrained with Klaus Schwab, who is now, being investigated. He's the arch globalist, and he's, the mindset behind a lot of Trudeau, and a lot of his ideas. So essentially, this is Trudeau on steroids in terms of the progressive, centralized control and power. And it's
Well,
happening just when globalism is falling apart.
I
I mean,
know.
it's finished in America. Several European states, we see the pushback and the uprisings
Mhm.
against these sorts of policies. And here you have, Canada and Carney, just like an anachronism, holding on to like the last
I
vestiges,
know. Well,
which will really pull Canada down. I mean, do you think Canada can recover from this?
no, no, I actually in our next thing, when we talk about, oh, Canada, where the hell are you going? Um, I will show you a chart that is really quite alarming, and you'll see how far behind we've become on a GDP per capita basis and how much we're suffering. And unless we are able to enrich ourselves with the great natural resources that we have in this country, and Carney won't let that happen,
Mm-mm.
we can't get out of this, right? Do you remember, and maybe you didn't get it spinning around on virally in the US, but in Canada we had the Klaus Schwab clip where he just to backdrop, our previous government before Carney had Trudeau, and then his second in command was Chrystia Freeland. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Chrystia Freeland
Yep.
it,
I know her.
has a good close relationship with Carney. Carney is one of her kids' godfathers. Okay.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. So all three of them were big on the World Economic Forum platform. And
Right.
at one point, a couple of years ago, when they were trying to get the Great Reset up and running, Klaus Schwab in an interview said, "We have penetrated the cabinet." So
Oh
Canada,
God.
yeah,
Oh
he did. He did. He
God.
said that. He said, half of
Of
Canada's
course he did,
cabinet.
because when you watch videos of Klaus Schwab, like you're stunned by what is coming out of his house. Like
I
house, like
know.
I always people would always tell me Klaus Schwab is like the devil incarnate, and I'd never really read anything by him or really listened to him. And when I started, I was like, oh my God, this guy does not hide any. This guy says everything he believes. No wonder everybody thinks he's this like this like evil entity, because he says the most just diabolical
I know,
things.
and he says it that way. So I said, and so I play those clips once in a while for friends, and I go, "He's penetrated the cabinet." Now look, the World Economic Forum gave us Trudeau, and by the way, I watched how that happened during the Liberal the selection process. Gave us Trudeau, Freeland, and put Carney right in, popped him right in, nice neatly.
Yeah.
So Canada, I don't think we can recover very easily from this. I don't have great hopes for this country. I will say with great relief, both of my daughters have American fathers. So they're half
Mm,
American. So
okay.
they won't be stuck here. That's what I'm worried about. If it gets
Yeah.
worse and worse. And oh, by the way, I'm moving my websites to Poland because we have censorship laws that are on the books here.
Oh,
And it's going to get worse under Carney unless he's a freaking miracle and does an about face. But
right.
he's
Like
already,
Fetterman.
yeah,
Unless
exactly.
he undergoes some sort of like medical procedure and all of a sudden he becomes a rational man.
I know we don't think that's going to happen though, because Carney's been going around saying there are American platforms that allow basically too much free speech. So I have to get some stuff out, and I said to my friends, as long as my dogs are looked after, if I get arrested, just make sure my dogs are looked after. That's how bad it's gotten now. So
Yeah.
anyway, on that cheery, happy note, we should come back another day and have a little conversation about some other things going forward. And in
Yes.
the meantime, as we always say, don't be enraged, be engaged.
Mm, love that.
Okay, till we meet again, pray freely.
Wonderful. Great to talk to you, Matt.
Take care.
When I mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin, and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum. But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
You've been listening to Not Your Donkey with Merritt Jacks and Karis Rhea. You can follow us on Twitter, and we each have our own account. Mine is basically my first name and last name, which is at Merritt Jacks, MaretJaks. Karis Rhea is her last name and first name, which is at RHEAKARYS. Thanks for stopping by, and until we meet again, brave freely.